food ban lifted. Taiwan ends a decade-long ban on produce from areas hit by the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The scramble for eggs. Officials hatch a plan to ease the egg squeeze sweeping the country. A new year, a new bump in COVID cases. For now, quarantine rules and restrictions remain in place. Plus,
75 years ago, China was locked in the midst of a brutal civil war that saw hundreds and thousands of people, just like these, flee to Taiwan. I'm Ed Moon for TaiwanPlus, and today I take you to meet one of Taiwan's few remaining veterans from the Chinese Civil War.
A warm welcome to Taiwan Plus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan on Tuesday relaxed a decade-long ban on food imports from Fukushima and surrounding areas in Japan. The ban was imposed after the Fukushima nuclear power plant was damaged by an earthquake in 2011. The cabinet said all imports would be inspected to international standards, and some items like wild bird meat, mushrooms and canola remain prohibited. Rick Lowett reports.
These strawberries are no longer forbidden fruit. For over a decade, such imports from Fukushima were banned in Taiwan. But now, the government is relaxing curbs on food from Japan's Fukushima region. This, despite remaining concerns about the safety of imports from the site of one of the world's worst nuclear disasters. The ban has been a sticking point between Taiwan and Japan, and President Tsai Ing-wen needs Tokyo's support for Taiwan's application to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP. This massive trade bloc is composed of 11 countries around the Pacific Rim, including Canada, Japan, and New Zealand.
台湾的确愿意根据国际规范来进行我们的这个经贸措施。今天的这个调整措施会是我们参加 TPP 的一个非常大的助力。
Joining the bloc would boost trade and help Taiwan reduce its economic reliance on China at a time when tensions are rising across the strait. Just a handful of countries, including South Korea and China, forbid some or all of Fukushima imports. But in a 2018 referendum, residents in Taiwan overwhelmingly voiced support for the ban, and there is a risk that the change in policy will cost Taiwanese president political capital ahead of local elections in November. The major opposition party, the Kuomintang, or KMT, is looking to take advantage.
我们坚决反对的立场，我们支持所有能够维护我们食安的食品进口，但是我们绝对不能支持这样粗糙、这样霸凌民意、这样不跟人民沟通的一场开放核实的一个过程。
2 months ago, Tsai came out on top against the opposition in a referendum on a similar issue: US pork imports containing a controversial additive. And this recent move to lift the ban on certain items from Fukushima shows her confidence in weathering local political opposition in her bid to strengthen Taiwan's ties abroad. Alex Chen and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
The US Department of Defense has announced its approval of a possible $100 million sale of equipment to maintain Taiwan's Patriot missile defense system. The Pentagon says the proposed sale will help improve Taiwan's security and assist in maintaining political stability, military balance, economic development and progress in the region. Taiwan first purchased Patriot missiles in the 1990s and has stepped up efforts in recent years to upgrade and maintain its defense capabilities amid military pressure from China. The sale must still be approved by Congress. Taiwan has been in the grip of an acute egg shortage for over a month, and people have been scrambling to hunt them down before they sell out. Bing Wang finds out why and what the government is doing about it.
These people are lining up around the corner. That's because they just got word that this market has eggs in stock. Eggs have been in short supply for several weeks now, and any that can be found are snapped up quickly. Some people even travel up to 150 kilometers just to get their hands on them.
听说有些人 跑到中部来买鸡蛋，因为现在这个南来北往很方便哈。所以我听说有些人到台中来扫货，也造成我们市面上有一点点短缺哈。那而且价钱有稍微在提高。
There are a few reasons for the scarcity: cold weather, a December outbreak of avian flu at a chicken farm in central Taiwan, and an increase in the price of corn for chicken feed.
我们讲玉米好了，在去年大概是在7块多，那今年飙涨到15块。
To deal with the rising costs of raising chickens, the Council of Agriculture has hatched a plan to help chicken farmers, and are not putting all their eggs in one basket. The council will give farmers a subsidy of 3 NT dollars or 18 US cents for every 600 grams of eggs, as well as 25 NT dollars or 90 US cents for each egg-laying chicken. The government has also waived tariffs for importers of soybeans, wheat, and corn to offset rising chicken feed prices.
就是要给农民一个价位给他产生出来，如果你给他奖励一点，他就留着再生蛋。
But in the short term, the government is importing more eggs from Australia, Japan, and the United States. These measures will continue until the end of the month, by which time officials hope to have local shelves fully stocked again. Klein Wong and Bing Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Central Epidemic Command Center on Tuesday reported 26 new domestic cases of COVID-19 in a significant rise. There are also 22 new imported cases. Louise Watt reports.
Over the Lunar New Year, thousands of people travelled across Taiwan, despite concerns that those festivities could kick off a new round of infections. On Tuesday, those concerns seemed to materialise, with more than 24 local infections reported. But for now, current quarantine rules will stay in place until the end of February. Arrivals can spend up to half of their 14-day quarantine at home under certain conditions. The health minister told a radio show that Taiwan would follow a different path to other countries.
棒球和伊跟与疫苗所谓的与病毒共存啊，我们要那棒球，我们要在可控的范围里面做。在10天了以后，你可能是10天全集中检疫嘛，你可能是7天全检疫，你可能是5天全检疫嘛。
But the health minister explained that such changes would only be considered after the Lantern Festival on February the 15th. Also on February the 15th, migrant workers from the Philippines and Vietnam will be allowed back into Taiwan. They join workers from Indonesia and Thailand who were allowed back in from late last year.
那也经过确认，我们所有的这个移工来源国都能够配合相关的一个防疫的措施。那这一次必须要都能够完全接种疫苗，并且要能够上传相关的接种证明。那经过查核同意后，才能够引进。
Migrant workers, along with all foreigners without residency, were barred from entering Taiwan in May last year. Should borders be reopened, Health Minister Chen Shizhong says Taiwan would do it gradually, with business travellers allowed in before tourists. And that will only happen if the COVID situation is under control. Karma Xu and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Daily COVID-19 cases in Hong Kong hit a new daily high of 614 on Monday. Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick reports on whether this fifth wave of infections will be a turning point for the zero COVID holdout, or whether the government will tighten pandemic restrictions further.
From barely 100 last week to more than 600 on Monday, daily COVID-19 cases in Hong Kong are rising exponentially. One expert predicts they'll soon break 1,000. In the face of this surge, the city's top officials says it's best to hold fast to a zero COVID strategy.
For the containment policy, at the moment, it is still the best policy and strategy for Hong Kong. It has proven to be effective in helping Hong Kong to suppress the previous waves and allow people to get back to their normal work.
But with Hong Kong still determined to stamp out transmission through contact tracing, localized lockdowns, mass testing, and border restrictions, not all health experts in the city are behind the government's approach.
Right now in Hong Kong, we're facing Omicron. And so the measures that we're taking now, which would have controlled the previous outbreaks, probably won't be able to control Omicron because it's so much more transmissible.
The latest wave has compelled many vaccine-hesitant Hong Kongers to get the jab. Despite early access to both the Sinovac and Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines, the vaccination rate in Hong Kong lags far behind that of Singapore or Taiwan, which struggled to obtain vaccine supplies earlier in the pandemic. The problem is particularly acute amongst the most vulnerable. Only about a fifth of those over 80 are protected.
Zero COVID is great when you're at zero. When you're dealing with outbreaks, it's not so great. In Hong Kong, I think there's a decision that needs to be made very soon, actually, about whether we're going to really try to get back to zero or whether we're going to switch over to another strategy.
Famously cosmopolitan and globally connected, Hong Kong has been largely isolated from the rest of the world by its strict COVID measures, which have increasingly aligned with China's to push for a reopening of the city's border with the mainland. The city's fifth wave presents a stark choice between tightening mainland-style measures or reassessing its priorities, weighing the risks of gradually opening up against the toll of continued restrictions on its people. Ryan Hilkel-Patrick for TaiwanPlus.
Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva has made Olympic history at the Winter Games in Beijing. The 15-year-old sensation became the first woman to land a quadruple jump in Olympic competition and followed it up with a second. The feat earned her first place in the women's single free skating and helped Russia Olympic Committee claim gold in the team figure skating event. USA won silver, with Japan taking bronze. Coming up, the leaders of Russia and France meet in the latest efforts to quell tensions at the Ukrainian border. Stay with us after the break.
Welcome to Legit Mando. Today we're going to learn the Mandarin phrases 我吃,我喜欢吃 and 我最爱吃。你也喜欢吃鸡排吗？我最爱吃鸡排。
你吃过了吗？
吃过了吗 actually used as a greeting, like saying, how are you?
I eat vegetarian food, obviously. Can I just go eat my salad? And when I'm back, you'll be done, yeah?
Nope. You're stuck with me.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Here's a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world. Cyclone Batsirai has hit Madagascar. Officials say the storm killed at least 20 people and displaced more than 55,000. The tropical storm was the second to hit the country in 2 weeks, following Cyclone Ana, which killed 55 people and left 130,000 homeless. The latest storm is reported to have destroyed crops close to harvest season. It is likely to worsen an ongoing food shortage in the country, which was already suffering from severe drought. The leaders of France and Germany are spearheading the latest diplomatic efforts to quell tensions at the Ukrainian border. As French President Emmanuel Macron held marathon talks with Putin in Moscow, the German Chancellor headed to Washington. But as James Chater reports, a thick web of vested interests means diplomatic breakthroughs are proving hard to come by.
Over a Moscow dinner of reindeer and blackberries, the leaders of Russia and France sat down in the latest effort to quell tensions at the Ukrainian border. It's the first meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and a Western leader since Moscow began amassing troops along its border with Ukraine. And despite the distance between the two presidents, signs that the 5 hours of talks bore fruit.
Господин президент посчитал нужным приехать в Россию, обменяться своими мнениями, обменяться мнениями по поводу того, как нам действовать дальше. Ряд его идей, предложений, наверное, о которых пока еще рано говорить, все-таки я считаю вполне возможными для того, чтобы положить их в основу дальнейших наших совместных шагов.
The West is worried an invasion of Ukraine is imminent, but Moscow flatly denies this. After the talks, French President Emmanuel Macron said he's hopeful an understanding can be reached between Moscow and the West.
Nous avons essayé de bâtir des éléments de convergence pour agir utilement dans les prochaines semaines. Le premier élément, c'est la nécessité de travailler très rapidement pour éviter toute escalade. L'accumulation des tensions en cours emporte un risque de dégradation brutale de l'équilibre et de la stabilité du continent.
Central to instability in the region is Ukraine's potential accession to NATO. Russia wants NATO to rule out Ukraine joining, but the US says it cannot meet this demand. Moscow says its build-up of more than 100,000 troops at the Ukrainian border is a product of this impasse. Meanwhile, in Washington, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz received a warm welcome from US President Joe Biden, and Ukraine was high on the agenda.
Germany is one of America's closest allies. We're working in lockstep to further deter Russian aggression in Europe.
But the German leader has been criticized by other US politicians for his inaction on Ukraine. Scholz hasn't let military aid to Kyiv fly through German airspace. He's also ruled out supplying Ukraine with weapons or ammunition. On the matter of a proposed gas pipeline slated to supply Russian gas to Europe, Biden was adamant in ruling out the project if Russia invades Ukraine. But Scholz did not make an absolute commitment to pulling the plug. Later this week, Scholz will host leaders of the Baltic states in Berlin. And on Tuesday, French President Macron heads to Kyiv, where he'll be hoping to bridge a little more diplomatic distance. Asnaya Joe and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
The Second World War brought tumultuous changes across the world, and Taiwan was no exception. As Ed Moon reports, Taiwan soon found itself home to soldiers from China who had experienced nearly a decade of war with both Japan and the Chinese communists.
When World War II began, Taiwan was a colony of Japan. It then came under the rule of the Republic of China after the war, when the Chinese government accepted the Japanese surrender on the island on behalf of the Allies. Not long after the war's end, hostilities resumed between the Republic of China government, led by the Kuomintang and Chiang Kai-shek, and the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong. After a string of defeats culminating in the communist capture of the capital in Nanjing, Chiang Kai-shek retreated with his government to Taiwan. Also making the journey were around 1 million refugees, many of whom were soldiers.
枪在我们的肩上，血在我们的胸膛。枪在我们的肩膀，血在我们的胸膛。
A lifetime of service, and a witness to some of the 20th century's most tumultuous moments.
我的名字是魏仲康，我今年97岁，出生于四川成都华阳县。
Wei Zhongkang has dedicated his life to the Republic of China. So much so that he insisted on wearing an old army uniform to meet us at his home, a retirement village for veterans located in Jianghua County, central Taiwan. He is one of about 350 residents living in the facility, which is overseen by the government's Veteran Affairs Council. It's a place where ex-soldiers can enjoy their retirement and receive care while maintaining their independence. Wei joined the Republic of China Armed Forces when he was only 17 and has been a loyal soldier ever since, retreating along with Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang government from China to Taiwan after the Chinese Civil War. But he didn't volunteer for the job.
我加入军队那个时候是晚上强迫把我抓去的。那个时候到云南，加入部队是54军。
Wei found himself thrust into one of the Second World War's bloodiest conflicts, a battle between China on the Allied side and Japan. He took part in the Salween campaign, which saw more than 40,000 Chinese troops cooperate with US forces to attack the Japanese in Burma and reopen vital Allied supply lanes. While Wei remembers the Japanese as ferocious fighters, he bears no hatred towards the former enemy.
然后对日本人的感觉也没有什么了。当时两边对付的时候是你死我活，可是现在大家都和平了嘛，平时要认识都是好朋友，哪成了敌人呢？
The Japanese surrender in 1945 brought a long-awaited peace for many countries. But for Wei, the battles were just beginning. Before the year was out, he was fighting Chinese Communist Party forces under the leadership of Mao Zedong in a recommencement of a decades-long civil war between the Communists and Kuomintang. Wei remembers war against the Communists as being completely different to the battle against Japan.
跟日本人打仗啊， 那个是日本人是凶悍，他是训练过的兵，打仗不一样。而中共的兵呢，他先用民兵来攻击你，哎，这些没训练的来攻击你，你的子弹咚咚咚咚咚咚咚的，差不多快打光了。
He was captured by Mao's forces, and his experience during the Civil War left him with a lasting distrust of the Chinese communists.
对老百姓，共产党他都是欺骗，都是不讲实话。那个时候的共产党更比现在最坏的。
After escaping from the communists, Wei arrived in Taiwan in 1948, one of over 1 million people evacuated to the island at the end of the Civil War. In 1949, Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China, leaving the Republic of China government in charge of only Taiwan and a few outlying islands. Wei has never returned since that day. Now his family are the caregivers at a veterans home, and his friends here in Taiwan.
像我的家人呐，我现在都不记得了。我在台湾，我都没有给大陆写过半封信，我没有回过大陆。有。
你有去过哪里？
我只去田中啊。
田中街上。
田中街上，
卡拉 OK 哦，卡拉 OK 跟谁唱？
有人唱啊。
It has been well over half a century since Wei set sail for Taiwan. In that time, Taiwan has undergone tremendous changes, from one-party rule to vibrant democracy, and with it has come a flourishing of an independent Taiwan identity separate from China. But Wei hopes the future generations will hold on to their Chinese heritage.
台湾这个是本来是好地方，也不冷，也不热，我觉得是台湾人，也是台湾人，也是中国人。可是不是共产党人就行了。
There are but a few members of Wei's generation remaining, and for many, the horrors of war have faded. But as tensions across the Taiwan Strait rise once more, Wei has a message to share.
我一生中都在和中共、和日本都在战争、都在枪林弹雨中混过。可是你们后面的人要以和平。不要为战争，要以和为贵。
Ricky and Ed Moon for TaiwanPlus.
Soldiers and others who came to Taiwan from China after World War II are often known as Mainlanders in English, a reference to their origins in mainland China. To find out more about their history, TaiwanPlus reporter Ed Moon spoke to Dominic Mongshen Riang, an associate professor at the University of Missouri, whose research focuses on the Mainlander experience in Taiwan. He began by asking him what life was like for those who fled China for Taiwan after the Chinese Civil War.
If you want me to put it in one word, the word will be it will be complicated, because there's really a lot of complexity in how actually different groups of people ended up in Taiwan. Of course, in the first stage, you have ones that had money, had connections, and has the means to get to Taiwan. At the very bottom, you do have hundreds of thousands of conscripts. These are usually people from the countryside. They were, peasants, usually very young, for people of peasant background, conscripted into the war, or more often than not, towards the end of the war, being held at gunpoint, being really literally kidnapped by nationalist army, passing through their region, and sometimes on their way to Taiwan and basically try to replenish the ranks, right? When they got to Taiwan, they were not only looked down by the mainlander elites, they were also looked down by the local Taiwanese population.
And how does identity play out now in Taiwan? Do mainlanders and their descendants still think of themselves as Chinese?
If you ask another scholar or mainlander themselves, you get different answers. They're first and foremost Taiwanese, and they're definitely Chinese. But when you ask most of them about their national identity, their national identity is definitely with Taiwan or with the Republic of China. And the history that the version of Chinese history that they identify with is the version of history promoted by the Republic of China on Taiwan, not the version of Chinese history or the version of revolutionary Chinese history, promoted by the PRC or the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing. There's a huge difference.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Today we leave you with pictures of an Algerian artist who creates striking pieces of art from spare car parts. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.